Mao Golvellius is best known in the West for its Sega Master System version, which got an official English localization as Golvellius Valley of Doom shortly after its release in 1988. But the original 1987 release of Golvellius for the MSX home computer was a very different game. It has similar mechanics and systems, but the overworld, dungeons, and graphics are all completely different. As you can see, it starts out like any other platformer, with the main character running through a cave dodging snakes, weird pink spiders, and other monsters. You may have noticed that our character, Golvellius, has a sword. You can actually use this to attack, but if you complete the first cave without killing any enemies, you get a special reward. Golvellius cannot change his facing direction, so you can only attack to the right. Golvellius MSX was designed by Satoshi Fujishima, also known as Pack, who additionally handled the story, graphics, and most of the programming, but the Sega Master System version was mostly developed by other compile staff. Surprise! Golvellius isn't a platformer. It's a top-down action game similar to Zelda, with some platforming sections. By completing the first platforming section without killing any enemies, our find is set to the maximum. In the world of Golvellius, you will find caves, which contain useful items and helpful NPCs. Many caves are open by default, but some caves have secret reveal conditions you have to meet to make the cave appear. I'll list these conditions on the right side of the screen. In this cave, we find a Bible that we can purchase for 500 find. Buying it increases our maximum find. This cave was hidden, but we revealed it by killing an enemy. It contains a potion, which would increase our maximum power, but we can't afford it. In addition to the Sega Master System version of Golvellius, there was another Golvellius game for the MSX2, a remake of sorts called Shin Mao Golvellius, which again plays similarly, but has a different overworld and different dungeons. Pack Fujishima was working on a sequel to Golvellius while the Master System and MSX2 versions were being developed, and he had very little involvement with them. The sequel never got finished. I mention this because I think the MSX version of Golvellius has a distinct creative voice that got lost to some extent when it was remade for other platforms. For many years, Golvellius MSX was only available in Japanese, but in 2006, a retro gaming service called WOOMB, spelt with 2 O's, was launched. WOOMB offered official English localizations of a number of Japanese MSX games, including localized manuals. I'm playing the WOOMB translation of this game. The English manual explains that find supposedly represents your ability to find hidden holes in caves. However, almost none of the reveal conditions are actually connected to how much find you have. It's basically just currency, and in fact, it was renamed to gold in the English Master System version. This is Randar. He's sort of a mascot for Compile, the company that made the game, and he refills your power to the maximum for only 150 find. Earlier, we got a hint to kill at graves. If we kill 6 enemies in this graveyard, a cave opens, and inside is the Zest Boots, an extremely important item. By default, the stun time after getting hit in this game is almost as long as your invincibility frames. This means slow-moving enemies can easily stun-lock you to death. Getting the boots reduces stun time so that the combat is no longer impossible. Over here is a cave that we can't reach yet. We're unable to cross water right now. Up north was another river we couldn't cross. To proceed, we'll have to find and kill DESVA, as the fairy Rio hinted to us earlier. A cave is open on the screen now that we have the Zest boots. We learn that DESVA's cave is guarded by blue bats. If we kill 6 blue bats on the screen, a cave will open. Golvellius not only has horizontal platforming stages and a top-down Zelda-style overworld, but also vertical scrolling stages, which play a bit like a shmup, except you only have a short-range attack. It's not really a danger here, but if you get pushed off the bottom of the screen by a wall, you'll get kicked out of the dungeon and have to restart from the beginning. In this early level though, most of the danger comes from just trying to dodge the bats. DESVA is a pretty easy boss. For some reason, you can move diagonally in boss fights, but not in the overworld. It's interesting to me that they didn't just reuse the character movement from the overworld. Defeating a boss fully refills your power and sets your find to the maximum. With DESVA down, we're able to cross the river and continue exploring the world. We'll stop by this cave to pick up the potion that we couldn't afford earlier. There's something else we're about to buy that costs 1,000 find, so I gain a bit here. A cave has now opened on the screen, which contains a crystal. We'll need to collect all of these to enter the final dungeon. Before we cross this river and move on with our lives, there's still one screen in this area where we haven't found a hidden cave, the starting screen. For a while, I wondered if it was even possible to open a cave here. I thought maybe it's connected to the initial platforming section from the start of the game and there's no way to re-enter it. But it turns out it actually is possible. The cave on the first screen is opened by inputting the code left, right, left, right, left, right. It actually contains a hidden sound test. I don't know how this was discovered, I learned it from a guide, but the same code unlocks a sound test in Gardeek, another compile game programmed by Pak Fujishima. Something I forgot to mention in the on-screen notes is that you have to leave and re-enter the screen before the code will work. It won't work if you try it after spawning on this screen, when you start or continue a new game. A bridge has now appeared on this screen, and we can explore more of the world. This cave contains a shield that blocks projectiles from certain enemies, but it costs more fine than we can even carry. We'll have to come back for it later. Here we meet Winkle, who tells us our password. This game allows you to record your save data by writing down a short password, a convenient feature that many modern games lack. These snakes give a decent amount of find. You'll often see me stop and kill stuff for a bit before moving on from a screen just to gain a bit of find for future purchases. By the way, Randar's here. On this screen, killing 6 enemies will once again open a cave, but it's a little harder to discover that here because these spiders are kind of a pain. You just need to take a leap of faith and keep killing spiders. Our reward is a Maya herb, which heals part of your power when you're about to die, similar to the bottled fairies in many Zelda games. You can carry up to 3 herbs, but I'm pretty good at this game, so I'm only going by 1. Here we learn that the next boss we have to obliterate is called CYPA. Golvellius MSX is pretty linear at the start. It kind of confines you to one small area at a time until you beat the boss, then a path opens to the next area. But it becomes much more open-ended later on. This screen with the snakes and the grubs, just like in my favorite game Void Stranger, is a good place to grind find in the second area. Here we meet a lovely woman named Annie, who offers us fruit. Her fruit will heal your power, but you will lose find each time you take a bite. Something I really loved when I first played this game was entering caves and being surprised by these cute characters. There ultimately aren't that many different characters to meet in this game, but I really like the ones they have. Remember that hint we got earlier to stab at the rocks in the bricks? If you stab with your sword 15 times on this screen, you'll open a cave containing yet another Bible. Accumulating as many Bibles as possible is important. Now that we're full of delicious Bibles, let's investigate this screen a little more carefully. Did you notice any suspicious looking places on this screen? That's right. If we stab the rock in the dead end, we open the entrance to CYPA's cave. This time, it's another platforming stage. Something you have to be careful about in these platforming stages is that the screen doesn't scroll backwards, and if you touch the left edge of the screen, you'll be kicked out, just like in the vertical scrolling stages. This isn't the case for the first platforming stage at the start of the game, but it's a danger in all the others. See that 4-block high ledge down there? Kalesis can only jump 3 blocks high. So if you took the lower path, you get stuck, and you would have to exit to the left and restart the stage. This kind of memorization-based design, where you have to pick the correct path or restart, is quite common in the dungeons of Golvellius, and it's one of the most striking features of the dungeon design to me. You might call the split paths in this dungeon a sort of tutorial for this recurring design thread. I don't think it's possible to get past those guys without taking damage. This isn't really the kind of game where you can avoid every hit. CYPA isn't too difficult, but I think it is possible for them to teleport on top of you, which does a lot of damage. That's why I keep trying to move down out of their teleport range between each hit. Two bosses down. Let's finish exploring the second area, then move on. First, with our maxed out money, we can buy this expensive potion. There's more I need to buy, so I'll kill some enemies while I make my way down to the unexplored screens at the bottom of this area. This screen's cave only opens after we've bought at least 3 potions. If you haven't found CYPA's cave by that point, the game offers you a hint. Down here, we're warned that there are strong foes ahead. If we fight the monsters on this screen, we'll see that they are indeed quite strong. We'll leave this area alone for now and come back later in the game. The cave on this screen is now open. It contains the second crystal for 2,000 find. I gain a bit more find here before moving on, since as I mentioned, this is a pretty nice grinding spot. We haven't found a cave on this screen with all the rocks yet. We actually can't open the cave here until much later in the game, so let's head on to the next area. Here's another Bible, but we don't have enough money for it. The Pope should really make those things cheaper. The enemies on the screen are really annoying. I'm only fighting them because it opens the cave here. Down here is a fiendish forest maze, with a suspicious looking tree at the end. That's not the pond tree, but we should check it out anyways. We find a sword that's way out of our price range. We'll have to skip that for now. The grey snakes are quite lucrative, so we're maxed out on find, which means we can afford that Bible. We'll actually head north though, and buy something else. Here we learn that we can meet Dina to obtain find, something that'll surely be incredibly useful in our quest. Up here, if we stab 10 times, we reveal a cave, which contains another Bible. I wanted to get this one first, since we're going to have to backtrack anyways. Now we're completely broke, but we'll fix that shortly. We peeked at the screen earlier, and there was no cave, but the cave is open now. If you enter the screen with less than 500 find, the cave will open, and it contains a fairy that gives you 1000 find. This fairy tells you to follow the river eastwards, but I don't really know why. Anyways, we need 3000 find for that Bible, so even with our earlier subsidy, we'll still have to do a bit of grinding. This probably isn't the best grinding screen, but it's a pretty decent one, and it's right beside both the Bible and the screen we want to visit next. While we were grinding, a cave appeared. Let's see what's inside. The fairy makes fun of you for using the screen to grind. I found this on my first playthrough, and it made me laugh out loud. We can buy the Bible. We now have 5000 max find, which still is enough to buy that sword, but it is enough to reveal a new cave. The cave on this screen opens once you reach 5000 max find. It contains a vital hint for our journey. Here's the hint that explains how you're actually supposed to know that having 5000 max find does something. We didn't go over here earlier, so I missed it. And here is the pond tree. It conceals a potion that we can't afford right now, because I forgot to visit the fairy that gives you 1000 find. We're a bit low on power. But fortunately, our favorite woman, Annie, is right here. Maybe when that fairy said to follow the river eastwards, she was just talking about the location of Annie. Stabbing 10 times on the screen reveals a cave. We've already found the pond tree and the soul tree, but we're still looking for the sand tree. Here we finally learn the name of the area's boss, TALBUR. Here's the entrance to the desert. Seems like a promising location for a sand tree. Simply stabbing 3 times here reveals a cave. Inside, we meet another beautiful woman named Dina. She steals your power and gives you find in exchange. Unfortunately, her exchange rate is kind of terrible, and now I'm so low on power that I actually have to go run back to Annie to get a refill. Dina is pretty much useless as a game mechanic, but I think her presence adds some lovely flavor and cuteness to the game. We actually had a net loss of 250 find from letting Dina drain our power and getting Annie to refill it. I need 2,000 find to make a purchase in the desert. Unfortunately, there aren't really any great grinding locations on the other side of the river. Let's explore the vast desert now. There's a potion that we can't afford without filling our entire wallet. On this screen, just staying on the screen for around 17 seconds opens the cave. Now that's more like it. A Bible for only 2,000 find. And here we see a tree in the middle of the sand. Unfortunately, I made the questionable decision to uncover the cave on the screen to the left, which contains dangerous enemies. The fairy's hint isn't even useful. I tried to grind for health drops on this screen before I visit the sand tree, but the snakes were being stingy. After finally getting one, I decided to move on. Because of that earlier debacle, I have to take on TALBUR's cave with low health. Let's see if I can pull it off. I died. TALBUR is a tricky boss at low health. I forget whether it's possible to safe spot them if you go to the top of the screen. Either way, I didn't want to risk that strategy with such low health. On the way back, I decided to buy that 1000 fine potion that I couldn't afford earlier. The boss fight aside, it's also very difficult to dodge the enemies in TALBUR's cave, particularly the bats. I take a lot of hits. And I got kicked out of the cave because I got pushed off the screen. Now I have to take it on again with half my health gone. Alright, round 2. I died again. This time, I decided to actually go buy 3 herbs for safety. For some reason, I also visited the ferry that gives you 1000 find along the way, even though I don't spend it on anything. And with that, TALBUR is finally dead. We can now buy that expensive potion we passed by earlier. And a cave has opened containing the third crystal. We'll need a bit more money to buy it though. Since there aren't really any good grinding spots around here, let's head into the next area. Here we can fight some Sonic the Hedgehogs to gain find pretty quickly. If you're not careful though, they'll get on top of you and drain your power fast. We haven't seen our friend Randar in a while, so we'll have to rely on Annie to heal again. We'll need a fair bit of money in this upcoming section. Over here, killing 10 enemies will cause a cave to appear. And hey, it contains that shield we saw earlier, but 10 times less expensive. If you buy it here, it'll disappear from the other location, and vice versa. So if you backtrack to buy the expensive shield, the cheap shield cave will just be empty. Finding a completely empty cave on my first playthrough was very funny and mysterious to me. Here's Winkle again. We haven't seen her for a while either. This screen is mysteriously devoid of enemies. If you stand still for around 8 seconds, a cave will open. Inside, the fairy Rio criticizes you for taking a rest. Down here, we meet Annie again, and get some much needed healing. But what happened to Randar? In the northern regions, we get a hint to stab the tombstones, so let's do some grave robbing. First, we find a Bible for only 500 find. Next, a potion that's also only 500 find. Well, that last one was a bust. But it's the cave down here that has the real treasure. It's that sword we saw earlier, but now for only 3,000 find. With our new sword in hand, let's head off and explore the vast western area. This is another kill 6 enemies cave, but interestingly, there's another condition. The fourth boss, FOTHBUS, must be alive for this cave to open. The next section of the game is about exploring a wide open area to find FOTHBUS's forest. Even with our new sword, the spiders continue to be annoying. If you stab 20 times on this screen, it reveals a cave. It's Winkle again. If you recall, she has another location just one screen south and one screen east from here. It's like having two McDonald's on the opposite ends of the same block. Here we see an enemy called Dead Randar. They're some of the strongest and most dangerous enemies in the game. Fortunately, the presence of dead Randars doesn't mean that Randar is dead. This screen is an excellent place to grind find because when you emerge from a cave, you're invincible. You can just sit in the cave entrance and stab repeatedly to fill up your find. I'll be doing this more than once, since we need a lot of find to buy everything. First, let's go back and grab this Bible we couldn't afford earlier. Stabbing 10 times reveals a cave, but it's on the other side of the river. Let's fill up on find, then head over there. It may seem like this game has a lot of money grinding, but I find it pretty breezy, and it's fun to experiment with different grinding spots and find efficient locations. This cave turns out to have a 5,000 find potion. That's why we needed so much money. This cave requires killing 15 enemies, which is the second highest number in the game after that 34 enemy cave we saw earlier. We see that Randar is also employing the McDonald's right around the corner business strategy. Although I think I actually missed this Randar for a long time because I just never stepped on that specific tile. I almost forgot to reveal the cave on the screen. It contains a useful hint that we'll employ shortly. With this pendant costing 6,000 find, and all those potions we bought, you can see why we did so much grinding. But if you aren't doing a 100% playthrough for a video, you probably won't stop to grind to buy everything as soon as you encounter it, and you'll probably miss some caves here and there as well. Here we see a Maya herb that costs 5,000 find. It works exactly the same as the cheaper herbs. There's just an inflation problem as you reach the later areas of the game. Here's a Bible, but more importantly, notice that this cave has the same reveal condition as that Randar on the beach we saw earlier. It's the exact same tile you have to step on for both screens, but because the screens look completely different, you probably wouldn't notice that the condition is being reused. We've been encountering a lot of screens where we can't enter the cave or can't open the cave yet, but here's one where we can. If you hold up and down simultaneously on the keyboard, you'll open this cave, which advertises a future compile game. Good luck doing that if you're playing on an MSX joystick. Here's another keyboard-only cave. If you press the Enter key, which otherwise has no in-game function, you'll open this cave. In the credits, someone named Kumiko Sharp is mentioned. This might be a reference to that person. Otherwise, I don't know what it means. This is probably a hint for that Bible by the river we saw earlier. Our old friend Randar is back, guarded by some dead Randars. We've almost wandered our way down to FOTHBUS's forest, so let's heal up. This is another lovely platforming section. Because we grab so many potions, as well as the pendant that halves damage taken, we're not too worried about running out of power. The main danger is taking the wrong path. Some would call it bad game design to put so much emphasis on memorizing the right path to take, but I see it as communication. The designer, Pak Fujishima, is challenging you to put yourself in his shoes and think like he did when he designed the game. When you get stuck, it doesn't mean you made a mistake, it just means you and Pak disagreed. Here, both paths are actually dead ends. Or are they? It turns out the top path has a hidden wall you can break. In some sense, these dungeons are building on the design of the Overworld sections, where you have to guess the conditions to open the secret caves. Sometimes the game gives you hints, but other times you just need to think like a game designer and imagine what the possibilities could be. The dungeons are a more strict and punishing take on this idea, where making the wrong guesses forces you to restart. Something I also really like is that a lot of the split paths actually don't matter. They both let you proceed, but you don't know that until you reach the end of the path. So when you're playing for the first time, it creates this tension every time there's a split, even though in reality, there's only a handful of dead ends you have to remember. This mini-boss is very easy if you bought the upgraded sword, but kind of a pain if you skip it. FOTHBUS shoots these weird homing orbs at you that you can destroy with your sword. The trick is to just not move horizontally at all. If you move to the side, the orbs will overwhelm you, but if you just stay centered, you can easily deal with them. With all the Bibles we've been collecting, we're pretty rich. First, let's grab the 4th crystal. Next, we'll head down south of the forest. Here, the fairy Rio tells us that after we slay FOTHBUS, we should go 2 screens east and 1 screen north. East, north, stop to admire the expensive herb, east, and now that we've beaten FOTHBUS, if we kill 3 enemies on this screen, a cave will open. If you don't beat FOTHBUS first, the cave won't appear. Inside, we get the Vanish Ring, which lets us vanish rocks by hitting them with our sword and breaking them. That's not the kind of rock we can break, it just happens to have a cave underneath it. These are the rocks the Vanish Ring lets us break. We can now reach new areas and caves. Randar's hanging out over here. And Annie's right beside him. Even Dina's here, and now we can actually make a profit by letting her drain our power and going to Randar to refill it. We earned a net 450 fine from that, not counting the crow we killed along the way, which is pretty dismal. On this screen, if we break a specific rock, we uncover the Legend Sword. Unfortunately, we're a long way away from affording it. Our next foe is named WALSO. Before we take them down, let's explore a bit more and see what we can find with our new ring. This cave only opens after you find the ring. I guess it's supposed to be a hint that lets you destroy rocks. This is a hint for a cave just to the north of us. If we stab 15 times on this screen, a cave is revealed. The cave is actually a bridge, which lets us get across the river. I really appreciate this sort of playful use of the game mechanics. Now that we can break rocks, there's another grave we can rob. It contains a delicious potion for us to drink. Let's head back across the river and explore the lower left corner of the map. The fairy tells us to go east and kill 10 foes. This is a nice hint because the screen to the east contains those annoying spiders. If you didn't know you'd find a secret, you probably wouldn't stick around to kill 10 of them. Anyways, down here, there's a Bible hidden under a rock. We're almost ready to take on WALSO now. But first, let's reveal the cave on this screen. I'm trying to get away from the skeletons so I can perform the reveal method in peace, but they're being very aggressive. If you input a lengthy code, right, left, up, down, down, you can open this cave, which contains the names of 3 past compile games that Pac Fujishima worked on. This code also appears in one of the mentioned games, Gull Cave. WALSO is in the very bottom left corner of the map. This screen also has a unique mouse enemy that doesn't appear anywhere else in the game. I try to kill one, but they're pretty strong, so I end up getting a bit overwhelmed. Pay attention as I go through WALSO's cave, and you notice there are a lot more dead ends and tricky swerves. Getting pushed out of the dungeon is more of a danger in this one than previous vertical caves. This mini-boss is actually pretty hard to kill before the cave ends, and there's no real benefit to doing it. WALSO has safe spots if you either stay at the top of the screen or just below their charge range. I don't really know how you're supposed to fight them otherwise, since their charge is so fast and hits really hard. We have enough money to buy that legend sword now, but we're actually going to be spending it on other things. First up, the 5th crystal. The next item is pretty far across the map. When you're playing this for the first time, you'll probably spend a lot of time wandering around trying to figure out where to go in the later parts of the game. A cave is open here now. It contains the aqua boots. These let us walk on water, which opens up many new areas. There is actually a hint to come back here for the boots, but the hint cave only opens after you beat FOTHBUS and get the Vanish Ring, so we missed it earlier. Here we learn about the next boss, JESPA, as well as the method for opening their cave, but it'll be a while before we get there. We've passed through the screen before, but now we're going to open the screen's cave. It's possible without the aqua boots, but the boots make it easier. Stab exactly 30 times, then wait 500 frames to open this cave. Don't ask how I know. You may recognize this dialogue from earlier in the game. It turns out the fairy in this cave just repeats random lines from other caves. There are a few lines that are exclusive to this fairy, which I think were cut from the rest of the game. The cut lines include explanations of how Randar and Winkle work, and a basically useless hint for finding FOTHBUS. Let's move on and continue exploring. Here's a potion we actually could have got earlier, after getting the ring. And down here, it's Randar. Kill 3 enemies on the screen to reveal a cave that we can only enter with the aqua boots. It contains a cheap, probably low quality Bible. Down here, a fairy tells us to go northwards, which we'll be ignoring for now. We're pretty low on find. We could stop and grind again, but fortunately, there's another way to earn money in this game. This is a bonus dungeon. It's completely optional, and it's very long and obnoxious. Just the kind of gaming I'm interested in. Like a lot of dungeons in Golvellius, there aren't actually that many dead ends, but it plays with the threat of dead ends to create a sense of tension. One, 2, 3, 4. I like this part because if you miss the middle, you think, oh no, I was probably supposed to go in there. But it's actually the only incorrect option. Now, we're spelling out Golvellius in blocks. This dungeon just keeps bringing the hits. Pak Fujishima was born in July 1967, and this game released in 1987, so he was around 19 or 20 when he was making it. And I think you can really feel a sense of youthful energy and playfulness from Golvellius. Completing the Another Cave sets our find to the maximum. We're ready to make some irresponsible purchases. Let's head down to the blank square in the bottom left. We never explored it because we got distracted by the kill 10 enemies prank. On this screen, we can reveal a cave by breaking a specific rock. Inside, we get an upgrade to our shield, which lets it block almost all projectiles, instead of only projectiles from certain enemies. With our new boots, we can cross the river at the bottom of the map and explore some new screens. It may look like this cave was opened by stabbing once, but this is actually another keyboard-only cave. You have to press spacebar, which is the sword key, to open it. The fairy actually comments that you're good at playing with the keyboard. Here we learn more about the location of JESPA's cave. We'll finally be heading there pretty soon. We actually got this hint earlier from the Rio that just says random lines. The relevant screen is just to our right. If we wait around without swinging our sword for about 8 seconds, the cave will open. Before we head to JESPA's island, what's over here? Do you recognize this place? We're back at the start of the game. We can finally enter the cave across this river, which contains an upgrade to our pendant that lets us resist even more damage. Now, I probably shouldn't have actually bought that pendant until later, because there's something else I need to buy that costs 10,000 find. So I'll be doing a bit of grinding as we make our way to JESPA's island. It's finally time to go northwards, like that fairy suggested earlier. Here we are, the top left of the map, only accessible with the aqua boots. By the way, did you know this game has a pause button? MSX keyboards have a key called stop, and you can press it to pause Golvellius. And on this screen, pausing is actually the reveal condition for the cave. Like I said earlier, I need 10,000 find, so I stop and kill crows here for a bit. The reason I needed all that money, of course, is to buy the world's most expensive Bible. We now have 13 Bibles. By stabbing repeatedly on this screen, we uncover a useful randar. I thought at first that you had to break a specific rock to open this cave, but you can actually just break any rock on the screen. Here we are. As we learned earlier, to enter JESPA's cave, we have to kill foes, but avoid breaking any rocks. Killing 6 enemies without breaking a rock will reveal the cave. Golvellius is a game that wants you to think about its designer and engage with his thought process as you play it, so much so that he engraved it in the blocks in this level. Staying on the top path here is much easier if you realize that Golvellius can run over 1-block gaps, just like Super Mario. And if you don't stay on the top path here, you get trapped. The level design in this game has a really chaotic style that I find very appealing. That mid-boss is actually dangerous if you don't have an upgraded shield. The projectiles will knock you back and get you kicked out of the dungeon. If you don't have an upgraded sword either, it becomes extremely hard. JESPA is another boss that moves so quickly and erratically that I don't know a good strategy other than using the safe spot at the top. We've defeated 6 bosses so far, and explored almost the whole map. So what's next? First, let's grab the 6th crystal. A cave has opened here now that we defeated JESPA. It tells us the location of the next boss, HAIDEE. There can't be too many more bosses left, right? Before we fight HAIDEE, let's do a bit of cave cleanup. Remember this cave we couldn't reach earlier? It has a potion for 10,000 find. Also, Dina's here. This cave opens when you collect every potion in the game and obtain maximum power. Wow, it's another cave. This time, it's a horizontal scrolling one. And I already screwed up. And I walked too far again. Like the other another cave, this one is very long and kind of nightmarish. And if you take it on early when your power is lower, you'll have more to worry about than scrolling the screen too far. This cave has a lot more dead ends than any of the other platforming caves we've seen so far. Usually, the top path is the safe one to take. For a long time, I didn't know what PCS 22951 means. So I asked Pak Fujishima, who's on Blue Sky. It turns out it was his account number for ASCII.NET PCS, an early Japanese online service. PCS stands for Public Communication Service, and users were assigned 5-digit account numbers. I got scared for a moment, but it turns out it's safe to fall here. These blocks spell out the Japanese word tsukaeta, which means I'm exhausted. Make sure you don't fall in the gaps between the characters. Take this fireball section slow and duck to reduce your knockback. You don't want to get kicked out when you're this far in. We finally escaped. Let's go buy that legend sword now. From looking at the map, you can probably guess where HAIDEE is. It's that place in the second area where we were warned about strong foes. We'll head over there and visit a few new caves along the way. This one gives us a hint about how to reveal HAIDEE's cave. The cave on this screen is finally open now, and it gives a more explicit hint. Remember this screen? We can open the cave here now that we have the Vanish Ring. It contains the final Bible. Let's explore the Strong Foes area now. There's a convenient Randar here. And here, we see a screen with 7 dead trees. Here's another screen with 7 dead trees. These are the ones we actually care about. You can open this cave early, but it's difficult to dodge the white bats, and they hit really hard if you don't have any pendants. Time for the final vertical scrolling stage of the game. Since we are thorough about collecting items, getting pushed off the screen is the main threat once again. As you can see though, it's very difficult to dodge the enemies, so it'd be hard to take on this cave early, especially without the pendants to reduce damage. The tradition of spelling stuff out with blocks continues. This time, it's compile. This huge bat goes down very quickly with the Legend Sword, and as a result, there's kind of nothing going on for the rest of the stage. HAIDEE's attacks home in on you, so you can't just safe spot them. You have to lead the attacks around to get an opening. With HAIDEE down, 2 new caves open nearby. That's right, it's almost time to take on Golvellius himself. We just need to find the 7th crystal. The 7th crystal is actually on the other side of the map. Let's head over there, and also clean up the final unrevealed caves. This cave is open now. It opens once you have all items, meaning both swords, both shields, both boots, both pendants, and the ring. Here's the 7th crystal, but where could Golvellius be? Is Golvellius in this cave? No, it's just a cave that opens when you collect all Bibles and gain 100,000 find max, officially making us the new Pope. Is Golvellius in here? No, but we get a hint that Golvellius' cave is inside a river. Well, there's one square on our map we haven't explored yet, and it appears to have a river passing through it. Here we are, the location of Golvellius' cave. Before we take him on, let's pay a visit to Winkle to get our final password. Then, let's visit Randar one last time. Alright, it's time to enter Golvellius' cave. This is the final dungeon, and it pulls out all the stops. This jump forces you to take damage, and the knockback sends you off the platform. The trick is to duck to reduce knockback, then quickly kill the enemies. Here, if you miss this jump, you'll get trapped and have to restart. Usually, the top path is the safe one in Golvellius platforming dungeons, but here, the game twists your expectations and makes you take the bottom path, mocking you with a single snake if you choose wrong. By the way, you're supposed to take the bottom path here as well. By the time I remembered, it was too late, so I just let the fireball knock me out. The top path actually goes on for quite a while before you hit a dead end. Making you take the bottom twice in a row is truly fiendish. I like this jump here. You either have to use ducking to kill the snake, or just land on the pixel beside it. Golvellius has a lot of long sections in its levels where there's kind of nothing going on, and I think that's beautiful. I really like this section, because you have to do all these tricky jumps to stay in the middle, and you never know if it's going to require you to stay in the middle to progress at some point, or if you're just doing it for no reason. It turns out it's for no reason. We defeated the previous two snake mid-bosses in one hit, but we're about to face the strongest mid-boss yet. A really big snake. It takes several hits to defeat with the Legend Sword instead of one. Here's the final boss, Golvellius. With the highest level equipment and maximum power, he's pretty easy, but he does hit hard. Here I'm trying to bait him into doing his charge attack before he dies, but he keeps just using the fire breath. We finally defeated the Demon King Golvellius. Enjoy the ending, and pay no attention to the single unrevealed cave on the map. Alright, so what's up with that last cave? Before we go check it out, I want to explain how I found all the other caves in the first place. Most of them are things you can figure out just by experimenting, but some of them are pretty obtuse, like the ones where you have to enter secret input codes or stab exactly 30 times and wait 500 frames. So let's go over the story of how I uncovered all of these. First, a lot of the caves are just always open unconditionally, no matter when you visit them or what you do on the screen. This accounts for 41 out of the 144 caves in the game. There's also a lot of caves which have pretty simple conditions that you can easily figure out on your own. For example, there are many caves that open if you just kill a certain number of enemies on the screen. Usually, it's 1, 3, or 6 enemies, but there are a few screens that require 10 enemies, one screen that requires 15 enemies, and of course, the screen where you kill 34 enemies and get made fun of for grinding. There's also some screens which combine killing enemies with an extra condition, like this one, which only opens after killing FOTHBUS. This cave has the Vanish Ring, which is required to beat the game, so you can't actually miss it. This cave is missable, because after you kill FOTHBUS, it actually closes permanently. But it's located right after the third area, so you're likely to stumble upon it before fighting FOTHBUS, which means it's not hard to discover. Another common type of reveal condition is stabbing a certain number of times. The different stab counts that appear are 3, 10, 15, and 20. All of these are low enough that you're likely to trigger them by accident just by trying to kill enemies on the screen. There's also a number of screens where you have to stab a specific object, like a rock, a grave, or a tree. A lot of these have associated hints, and even if they don't, it's usually pretty easy to find the specific thing you have to stab just through trial and error. One interesting special case is this screen, where you can actually break any one of the rocks on the screen. You don't have to stab a specific rock. I also included this cave in this category. Here you aren't really stabbing an object, just an empty tile of water, but it's similar in spirit. Another category of easy to find caves is caves that you have to visit to beat the game, like caves containing bosses or crystals. And on a similar note, caves that are always open once you get to the end game. These caves might be closed at first, but by the time you reach the end of the game, they'll be open and you can just walk around to find them. I guess the cave that opens if you have 3 potions technically doesn't fall in this category if you're doing some kind of low power challenge run. The last caves I've put in the simple category are 2 miscellaneous caves where the conditions are related to waiting. On this cave, you have to wait 1000 frames, or around 17 seconds. You'll probably stumble upon this while investigating whether it's an enemy count or stab count cave. Then this one requires you to wait for 500 frames without attacking. That would be trickier to figure out, but there's actually a hint in the screen right beside it. Now let's get into caves that are a little bit trickier. First, let's look at caves that close permanently after you beat a certain boss. We saw one example of this earlier with a kill 6 enemies cave that closes after you beat FOTHBUS, but there are a number of others. Once you realize what's going on though, these aren't too difficult to find. You just have to explore as thoroughly as possible before fighting each boss and you'll catch all of these caves. There's one interesting variant of this, which is a cave in the first area that combines this kind of condition with needing a specific item, the Zest boots. This isn't too hard to find though, because the first area is so small, and the boots are an important item. On a similar note, there are 2 caves that close after you obtain 6 potions. Both of these are in the second area though, where the maximum number of potions you can obtain is 3. So as long as you explore thoroughly before leaving, you'll catch these caves. Next up, caves that open if you walk on a specific tile. These aren't too hard to find, but I did miss one of them for a while. There are 2 of these caves, and what's interesting is they actually both have the same reveal condition. This cave is the one I found first, because there's a hint that says to tread the riverbed. I missed its counterpart for a while, since this beach corner is a bit less suspicious. Now, at this point, we've marked every cave that contains an item you can buy. That means we've discovered enough to get 100% completion in terms of items. The next 3 caves open when you meet different aspects of 100% completion. This one opens when you get all potions. This one opens when you get all Bibles. And this one opens when you get all items other than Maya herbs, meaning the swords, shields, boots, pendants, and the ring. Next, we have 2 weird ones that don't really fit into any category. This cave, which opens when you have less than 500 find, I actually discovered on my first playthrough. It's easy to stumble upon by accident if you happen to pass by the screen after buying something expensive. At that point, since the fairy inside gives you find, it's reasonable to guess that the condition is something to do with being low on find, and you can confirm that using the nearby any. This cave requires you to press spacebar on the keyboard. Spacebar is the sword key, but if you use an MSX joystick and press the sword button on that, it won't work. This was very easy for me to find because I played the game on an emulator using keyboard controls, but I think for players using a joystick it'd be very easy to miss. We've got 9 caves left to reveal. These are the difficult caves. For 2 of them, I learned the solutions from a Japanese fan site. This is another waiting cave. You have to stand completely still for around 8 seconds. I feel like I could have found this one myself eventually just by messing around, since the screen suspiciously has no enemies on it, but I had already read the solution before I really tried it seriously. This cave requires you to pause the game. I didn't even know the game had a pause button, so I probably would have never figured this out. Even if you do know about the pause feature, it seems hard to guess, but I can see how someone might stumble upon this one. Next, we have the cave on the starting screen, which contains a sound test. I was searching for something unrelated, and I found a Golvellius MSX guide on GameFAQs, which incredibly was written in 2025. I skimmed it, and I was shocked to find an explanation of how to reveal the cave on the first screen, something I didn't even know was possible. It turns out that the Japanese fan site I discussed earlier also has this information, but I had missed it. The reveal method is to input left, right, left, right, left, right. I'm not sure how this would have been discovered. I can see someone finding it by accident just by wiggling around with the controls. The same code is used in another compile game to access a secret sound test, so maybe somebody knew that and tried out the code in Golvellius. Personally, I think the accidental wiggling theory is more plausible. This cave is an interesting case because it's actually always open. I assumed it worked the same way as all the other always open caves for a while. But it turns out that this cave has its own unique reveal condition that's different from all the other caves. I'll talk about how I discovered that in a bit. We're now down to 5 caves, and I couldn't find any online resource that documented how to reveal them. I started to wonder if there really was a cave on every single screen in this game. Maybe some caves were just never implemented. Couldn't find information about these caves, and I couldn't reveal them myself, so I wondered if there was some kind of cheat or hack that would let me go in the caves. It turns out there was. The openMSX emulator I was using comes with built-in cheats, and to my surprise, someone had made a cheat for Golvellius called Open All Holes. So, I was finally able to confirm those 5 caves actually existed, and see what's inside them. 2 of the caves contained references to other compile games. One contained that mysterious phrase, Kumiko Love, which I suspected was another inside reference. One contained the fairy that says random lines taken from other caves. And the last one contained a strange fairy with no text. It showed the fairy sprite, but didn't display any text below it. Considering the suspicious contents of these caves, I felt like they weren't really intended to be discovered. I started to wonder if they even had reveal methods programmed in, or if these caves were removed. I was about to give up and accept that I'd never understand the final reveal methods, but then I made a breakthrough. I was looking at a map of Golvellius from VG Maps, and I noticed that on the map, one of the 5 legendary screens I didn't understand had a cave marked on it. That means whoever made the map had presumably found this cave legitimately. I figured if they can do it, I can do it too. So, I went to that screen and started messing around, and after a bit of work, it opened. With some experimentation, I was able to confirm the reveal condition. This is the cave where you press the up and down directions simultaneously. This was one of the caves with a reference to another compile game, so I thought if this one is accessible, maybe the other reference cave was accessible too. I tried for a while to uncover more caves manually, but I wasn't successful, so I set to work on trying to reverse engineer the game code. At first, I thought this was beyond my level of skill and knowledge, but I started to get some ideas. As a starting point, I wanted to try to recreate the Open All Holes cheat myself, using openMSX's Cheat Finder feature. This feature works like Cheat Engine if you've ever used that program. It lets you search for memory addresses with particular values and conditions. I wanted to use it to find a memory address that indicates whether a cave is open on screen. I'll demonstrate this with the following video. We start by looking at every possible memory address. Now, since nothing has changed on screen with regards to whether a cave is visible, we're going to search for all unchanged values. That narrowed it down a little. Now let's open the cave and search for values that changed. That narrowed it down from over 60,000 to only 45 values. While the cave is still on screen, let's search for unchanged values. Then, we'll scroll the cave off screen and search for changed values again. Then for unchanged values again. We go back to the previous screen and search for unchanged values. We've narrowed it down to only 7. We open the hole and search for changed values. It's not getting narrowed down, so let's go to a different screen. A cave is open, so we search for unchanged values. Still no luck. But now, let's go back to the first screen and search for changed again. Bingo! We narrowed it down to one value, which changes between 0 and 1 when a cave opens and closes. So to summarize, we've discovered that this memory address E048 is connected to the cave opening mechanism. The 0x is a prefix that indicates this is a hexadecimal or base 16 number. Now that we figured this out, let's use another feature called Watchpoints. We can watch the memory address E048 to see when it changes, and pause the code execution at the exact point of the change. With the game paused, we can then step backwards through the code to see exactly what code caused the modification. Let's see an example. We'll set a watch point on E048, trigger a known reveal condition, and then step backwards to see if we can find the code that controls the reveal condition. So here we have our watch point enabled, and we're on a screen where killing 6 enemies will reveal a cave. So let's kill 6 enemies. As soon as we killed the 6th enemy, the watch point was triggered, indicating that E048 was modified. Now, let's step backwards through the code. Notice that we ended up on a line that says LDB06. Load the value 6 into B. Isn't that interesting? If you look at the code we stopped at, it looks sort of like a table of numbers. We have 3 at the top, then 6, 1, 0A, which is hexadecimal for 10, 0F, which is hexadecimal for 15, and 22, which is hexadecimal for 34. These are the different counts used for enemy killing reveal conditions, so this must be the code that controls those conditions. By repeating this process, I was able to find the code for a number of reveal conditions, and confirm the exact values that are checked. For example, I was able to confirm the numbers for all the enemy count and stab count reveal conditions, as well as the more obscure ones, like the caves that close after you get 6 potions, or open if you have less than 500 find. The problem is that this method involves actually triggering the reveal condition in-game and stepping backwards, so it doesn't work for the conditions I don't know how to trigger. To figure out these unknown conditions, I had to go back even further and figure out how the game determines which reveal condition to run. For example, how does it decide to check kill 6 enemies instead of kill 3 enemies or stab 15 times? So let's look at the code that runs directly before the kill 6 enemies code and break down what it's doing. This section right here is a table lookup. You can see that HL and A keep being mentioned in the code. If you're familiar with programming, you can think of these as variables, although technically they're something called registers. What this code is doing is treating the value in HL as the location of a table, and using A as the row number to look up in the table. The value it retrieves from the table is the location of the reveal condition routine. So basically, depending on which table row it retrieves, a different reveal condition will be checked. So where does the row number A come from? Well, A is loaded from another memory address, E096. Meanwhile, the lookup table is located at memory address 9293. Putting this all together, we can figure out the locations of all the reveal condition routines by extracting the table from the ROM, and we can figure out which reveal condition is used on a specific screen by going to that screen and examining address E096. So here's the extracted table. I've highlighted the last 4 reveal conditions I needed to figure out. But before that, I mentioned this cave earlier, which is always open, but actually has a unique reveal condition that isn't used anywhere else in the game. How does this condition work? The code for it is simple. It checks if memory address EE4D is equal to 1, but I had trouble figuring out what that address actually means. It was this mysterious value that changes arbitrarily when you transition screens, but in a consistent way per screen. I eventually figured it out by looking at the block of memory surrounding address EE4D. This is the tile data for the screen. In other words, it determines which parts of the screen contain rocks, sand, bricks, trees, and so on. Address EE4D corresponds to the tile at row 7 and column 6. So reveal condition 65 checks if this specific tile is a basic sand tile. This confused me because this is always true. The tiles on the screen don't change as you progress through the game. So why have such an unusual condition? Well, my guess is it's a leftover from an earlier version of the screen. See, when you break a rock, it leaves behind a basic sand tile. So if there was a rock in that position, you would have to break it to open the cave. In fact, similar tile checking code is used on other screens where you have to break a specific rock. So, my guess is that an earlier version of the screen required you to break a rock to open the cave. Presumably the rock was removed or moved out of the way, but the reveal condition was left alone. So let's get into the last 4 unknown conditions now. Here's the code for reveal condition 72. Assembly code is pretty hard to read, but you don't always have to fully understand it to discover the condition. I knew from earlier investigations that address E04D is a count of how many times you stabbed on the current screen. This block of code checks that you stabbed exactly 30 times. If you stabbed any more or less than 30 times, it bails out and doesn't run the rest of the code. So the natural thing to do was to go to the screen, stab 30 times, and see what happens. I did just that, and after stabbing 30 times, I looked at the values of the other memory addresses mentioned in the code, D01E and E09E. I noticed right away that E09E was counting upwards. So the natural thing to do was wait. Sure enough, the cave soon opened. So what's actually going on? The code first checks if the stab counter is exactly 30. If it's exactly 30, it checks if your sword is drawn, and if so, it bails out. Otherwise, a timer starts ticking up once per frame, and once that timer hits 500, the cave opens. That's one reveal condition down. Stab 30 times, and wait 500 frames. This is the cave for the random Rio that quotes lines from other caves in the game. The next one I looked at was reveal condition 49, which calls a subroutine I didn't really understand, and then does a comparison with hex 7f, or 127 in decimal. I noticed that the subroutine uses the in and out instructions, and I looked up what they do. They're for interfacing with hardware, such as a keyboard. That led me to think this code was checking for input. Sure enough, when I looked up how to do keyboard input in an online MSX assembly resource, I found nearly identical code. From there, it was just a matter of figuring out which key the condition was checking for by looking up MSX keyboard matrix tables. The key in question was the enter key. The enter key has no other in-game function as far as I know, so this would be pretty hard to figure out without a hint. The cave contains the fairy that says, Kumiko Love. Next, I looked at reveal condition 51. The code for it is pretty long, and seems to be doing a lot of checks. Rather than analyzing the code itself, I decided to just observe the memory addresses E09E and E09F, which are frequently checked or modified by the code. I went and messed around on the screen and watched what happens to those values. You may recall that E09E was used as a 500 frame timer in reveal condition 72, but on this screen it seemed to be working differently. It seemed to be a counter of some kind that would change as I moved around and frequently reset to 0. E09F also changed values as I moved around. I guess based on this, that the code was probably looking for a specific directional input sequence, like the sound test code. Through trial and error, I was able to discover a sequence that causes E09E to keep counting up without resetting, and once it got high enough, the cave was revealed. Right, right, left, left, up, down, left, down, down, down. This cave's fairy mentions 3 past compile games, and the same code appears in Gull Cave, one of the mentioned games. I think it'd be very difficult to discover this without some form of reverse engineering. Alright, we're down to one final cave that we don't know how to enter. Let's take a look at the code. All the code does is load a 16-bit value from a specific memory address, E0A5, and check if it's 0. But what is E0A5? Using Watchpoints and Backtracing, I determined that E0A5 gets set the moment you enter a screen. Specifically, it gets a copy of whatever value is in another memory address, E006. So let's see what's going on with E006. Here's the code that sets E006. The code basically starts by loading 2 values, the 16-bit value at E006 and the value in a register called R. Then it performs a bunch of manipulations on these values and writes the change value back into E006. I didn't know what register R does, so I looked it up. Online resources mention that sometimes R is used to generate random numbers. That's right, we're looking at the random number generation code for Golvellius. If you're not familiar with how random number generation typically works in games, basically, there's a value called the state that gets repeatedly updated. You start with an initial state called the seed and feed it into the RNG algorithm. The algorithm does some calculations and spits out a new state. Then you feed that new state back into the algorithm and it spits out another one, and so on. The sequence of states isn't actually random, but it's usually complicated and unpredictable enough that it can be used to simulate random events. So when I say E006 is the state, what I mean is it holds the current value in the sequence of RNG results. So back to the reveal condition code. We know now that E0A5 copies its value from E006 whenever a new screen loads. That means E0A5 is the RNG state value at screen load time. And if that value is equal to 0, the cave opens. So this cave effectively just has a random chance of opening. But what is that chance? Well, there are 65,536 different possible 16-bit values, and we want one specific value, 0. So assuming every value has an equal chance of appearing, there's a 1 in 65,536 chance of this cave opening when we enter the screen. That's extremely low. So that's the final reveal condition. The 16-bit RNG value must be exactly 0 when you enter the screen. So of course, I cheated to see inside the cave. And inside, there was a fairy with no text, just a fairy sprite, and the rest of the screen was blank. Which is a pretty funny reward for having nearly impossible luck, but something seems strange about it. Earlier, I had extracted all the text from the ROM, and I found a line that says, "Lucky you," but it didn't seem to be used anywhere. It would make sense if it was supposed to be used here, but maybe there was a bug, or the line got removed. So that's the background behind the final unrevealed cave, but cheating my way in was a little unsatisfying. I wanted to be able to enter the cave without just editing memory to force it open. But a 1 in 65,536 chance is so rare that I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to get it just by scrolling the screen back and forth manually. In fact, there's potentially a bigger problem. Remember that video games typically don't use real random numbers, and instead generate pseudo-random numbers using a fixed algorithm. What if it turns out that it's not actually possible for the RNG algorithm to produce 0 on a screen transition, due to some quirk of how it's programmed? To confirm whether this was the case, I had to investigate how the RNG actually works. So here's a pretty direct translation of the assembly code. The state value, which is 16 bits, gets split up into two 8-bit halves, which are manipulated separately and then recombined. Don't worry too much about understanding the precise details yet. First, I want to explain what rotate means. This refers to rotating the bits of a binary number. So for example, a left rotation shifts all the bits to the left except the leftmost one, which wraps around and appears on the right. Similarly, a right rotation shifts everything to the right except the rightmost bit, which wraps around and appears on the left. Here's a simplified version of the code. When I say mod 256, what I mean is that if the number goes over 255, it wraps around to 0. This is because an 8-bit unsigned value can only store numbers from 0 to 255. It's not too important to understand the exact math being done, but basically, these two values called H and L are computed using the two halves of the current state as well as the register R. Then H and L are rotated and finally combined to form the new state. The important thing is that for the new state S to become 0, H and L must both be 0. In fact, they have to both be 0 before the rotation takes place, because if you rotate a non-zero number, it'll still be non-zero after the rotation. So, there are two possible ways L can become 0. Either R and S0 are both 0, or R is exactly equal to 256 minus S0. If L is 0, then H is 0 if and only if S1 is 0, because H is just L plus S1. So, we need two conditions to be true for the state to change from non-zero to 0. S1, the right half of the state, has to be 0, and the mysterious R register has to be exactly equal to 256 minus S0, the left half of the state. So how does this R register work? Is it possible to manipulate it into having a specific value? The R register is something called a memory refresh register. I don't fully understand it, but it's basically a counter that increases every time the MSX machine executes an instruction. From observing it, usually the counter goes up by 1 for each instruction, but sometimes it seems to go up by 2. It also counts modulo 128, meaning that when it gets above 127, it loops back around to 0. The key point here is that the number of instructions that the MSX machine executes in a single frame is variable. It depends on exactly what is going on in the game. That's why this register seems to work pretty well as a pseudo-random value. If you check this register at some arbitrary point in the middle of a frame, its value will usually be unpredictable. This also means we have some degree of influence over the R register, since taking different actions in-game will alter the number of instructions executed in a frame. For example, if we hold both the up and left directions during a frame, this seems to cause slightly more instructions to execute than if we only held left. But while we have this limited amount of influence, it's still a very unpredictable value that's hard to control precisely. So this was my strategy for entering the cave. First, go to the screen directly to the right and stand right against the screen edge. Next, wait until the RNG state is in the correct range to become 0 on the next RNG update. Since R takes values between 0 and 127, S0 has to be at least 129. Then, move left to trigger the screen transition. Triggering a screen transition will refresh the RNG. Then, we try to manipulate the value of R so that when the RNG refreshes, it will land on 0. The main way I found to manipulate R is to hold different inputs in addition to holding left. For example, if the R value is slightly too low, we can try holding up and left instead of just left, or down and left, or up and down and left, and we can throw in the sword button as well. This can slightly increase R and hopefully cause it to land on the right value. On the other hand, if R is already too high, I couldn't find a way to cause fewer instructions to be executed on a frame. So in that case, we just have to wait additional frames and hope for a better value of R. Through a great deal of trial and error, I was finally able to enter the cave without modifying memory. But while I didn't modify memory, I did use tool assistance to watch RNG state values and R values, fast forward the game until the RNG gets into the right state, and advance the game frame by frame to manipulate R. This was all done on an emulator, but in theory, it should be possible to open the cave on real hardware, assuming the behavior of R on real CPUs is similar to the emulator. However, the chance of getting this to happen in real time by pure luck seems ridiculously low. Now we've covered all the necessary background for what I'm about to show you. Let's go hit that 1 in 65,536 chance and see that empty cave for ourselves. Wait, what? Why did it trigger the lucky you text that time? Why did all my other attempts at entering this cave end up with blank text? Well, whenever I was testing things out related to this cave, I was using a 100% save file with my find fully maxed out. This cave actually checks if your find is less than the maximum. If it is, Rio will say, "Lucky you," and set your find to the max. But if your find is already maxed, nothing happens and Rio has no text. By sheer coincidence, when recording the final footage for this video, I enter the cave with less than max find for the first time, and I finally learned the truth behind this cave. That concludes my playthrough of Golvellius and my journey to reveal all caves. This is one of my favorite games ever, and I had a lot of fun uncovering its final secrets. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another cave.